Let's open our Bibles to Genesis 45. And we're going to talk about walking through the valley of broken relationships this morning. Maybe there's nothing more painful than having a relationship with someone, and then there is a moment where either sin or disagreement and sometimes pride comes in, and that relationship is severed. And we want to figure out how we walk through the valley of having a broken relationship. In 2022, there was a story that came from Washington State of Brian Stanley. Brian spent his youth shuffled back and forth in the foster care system, but after he became an adult, he eventually got a job, he got married, and his wife wanted to know, don't you ever want to know about your sister? Because he knew that he had a sister, but he really didn't know who she was. They had got separated in the shuffle of the foster care system in that state. Well, there was a program in which a person could take a DNA test if you were in that system to see if you matched up with someone else. And so finally, at his wife's urging, Brian took the DNA test. He sent it in, and sure enough, there was another person who was seeking to see if she had a brother, and the test came back like a 90% match that they were brother and sister. So they decided to meet. They met at a diner, a public place, just somewhere where they could just have a first meeting. And Rebecca got there first. She was sitting in a booth, and without ever being introduced to him, when Brian walked through the door, she gasped and said, "That's him." Got up, walked across the restaurant, tears are flowing. They're both embracing before they ever spoke a word. Well, a television station got a hold of that story, and they went to the diner, and there were a bunch of the regulars who were in there, and they started interviewing them. And one particular diner who had watched the whole thing unfold said, "Watching them made me want to make things right with my family." We love a reunion story. Those videos of soldiers coming home from a deployment, they get me every time. We love a reunion story. And so when it comes to our families, it might not necessarily be reunion, but maybe there needs to be reunification. Maybe there needs to be reconciliation of some past hurt. And that's what we're going to explore this morning, because in all of our families, there is some tension, there is some awkwardness, there is that one person that we all wish we could avoid. And if you don't know who that is in your family, well, it might be you. But all of us have those moments at Thanksgiving and at Christmas where we're sort of thrust into difficult situations. And I think the political divide in our country makes things even a little bit more exacerbated in that relationship. And so this morning we want to explore how we reconcile broken relationships. The story that we're going to talk about is the story of a guy named Joseph in the Old Testament. You need some background before I actually get to our text. So let me tell you Joseph's story. Joseph is the son of Jacob. Jacob, the father, had 12 sons. Now that in itself makes for kind of a big, difficult family. But what made it all the more interesting is that those 12 sons had one father, but there were 4 mothers involved. They put the fun in dysfunction, I'll tell you that. Because there was sibling rivalry always between these brothers. And Jacob treated Joseph as the favored son. Gave him a multicolored coat that nobody else had. He didn't have to go to work like his brothers most of the time. They went out tending sheep, and Joseph kind of stayed close to home. And so Jacob created some of this problem, and finally it reached such a boiling point that one day Joseph goes out into the pasture to find his brothers who haven't been home in a while, and Dad's suspicious of what they're doing out there. He goes out to check on them, and they say, "You know what? We can get rid of him for good." there are some Midianite traders that are coming by in a caravan going down to Egypt. We'll just sell him as a slave. And that's what they do. They take their brother and they sell him as a slave. They go back and tell Dad he's died. They tell him, Dad, he's dead. Dad, that he's dead. And so Jacob grieves the loss of Joseph, but the brothers know they sold him as a slave. They're rid of him forever now. Well, Joseph is carried down to Egypt, where he becomes the slave to an Egyptian general named Potiphar. And he prospers in Potiphar's house. He is so efficient, so effective, and so wise, even as a teenager, that Potiphar puts him over his entire household. But Potiphar's wife has eyes for Joseph, and she tries to lure him and seduce him. And when he resists her advances, she falsely accuses him of sexual assault and has Joseph thrown in prison. If it couldn't get worse, Joseph has gone from favored son to slave to now being thrown in prison. But in prison, Joseph is faithful and he prospers and he's given privileges, and the jailer entrusts him with things. And there he meets a couple of Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph has an unusual spiritual gift. It is very unusual. He has the ability to listen to someone's dreams and interpret what they mean, especially if this dream came from God. And so Joseph has this ability, and he interprets a dream for this man who was part of Pharaoh's court. And all that seems good, but when the official of Pharaoh goes back, he just forgets about Joseph. Just forgets about him. Until one day, Pharaoh had a dream. He had a dream, and he didn't know what it meant. He couldn't interpret it. And so Joseph is entrusted then to tell Pharaoh what this dream means. Joseph says to this servant of Pharaoh, I can interpret that dream. And so the servant of Pharaoh, the court official of Pharaoh, takes him. And he brings him to Pharaoh's palace, and he says, this guy, he told me what my dream meant, and he can tell you, Pharaoh, what your dream means. And so Pharaoh lays out the dream for Joseph. And Joseph says, I can tell you what that means. That means that we're about to enter 7 years of an economic boom. There's going to be prosperity. There's going to be so much grain. There's going to be so much food. But after 7 years of this incredible period of prosperity and all of our crops making great harvest, there's going to be 7 years of drought and famine and economic depression. It's going to be so bad that people are going to forget the good years. Pharaoh listens. And he says, who could I put in charge of something like this? Oh, you, Joseph, I'll put you in charge of this. So here's what happens to Joseph. Summary. Joseph goes from favored son to slave to prisoner. All of a sudden, in a matter of moments, Joseph is transported to Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh takes off his signet ring, his official symbol of power, puts it on Joseph's hands, and he says, you only answer to me. Everybody else in the kingdom is under your authority. Basically, Pharaoh says, you are the prime minister of Egypt. Everybody does what you say. And it took 20 years to get there. So Genesis 45 is 20 years after his brothers think we are done with Joseph. He is gone. We've sold him as a slave. Slaves didn't live that long in that culture. He's probably dead by now. They very seldom think of him. But when the rest of the world started running out of grain, so did Joseph's brothers. But they heard there was grain in Egypt, and so they go down to Egypt to buy food for their families. They buy some food. They see Joseph, but they don't know who Joseph is. But Joseph recognizes them. You see, Hebrew shepherds would have had long hair and long beards. They would have dressed in very plain clothes. Joseph is now Egyptian. The Egyptians cut their hair. They didn't shave, they plucked their beards. That sounds very painful to me. But he would have looked clean shaven. His brothers had big beards. He would have dressed in the clothing of the Egyptians. They didn't recognize him. They've long since forgotten him. But Joseph knew them. So he gave them some tests. Without going so deeply into those, because I don't have time to do that to get to the text, Joseph sends them back and tells them, I want you to bring your younger brother with you. Now, the younger brother was Joseph's brother with the same mother. His name was Benjamin, and he loved Benjamin, and he wanted to see Benjamin. And so he sends them back. Well, they delayed, but finally they ran out of food again. They said, we got to go back down there. And so they come back, and Benjamin is with them. Now, I want you to just imagine the emotion that you've been sold like Joseph. You've been sent to Egypt. It's been 20 years, and your brothers walk in, and then the youngest of them walks in, and immediately you see it in his eyes. That's Benjamin. That's your brother. That's your little brother. And this is what happens in Genesis 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not control himself in front of everyone standing before him. And he shouted, have everyone leave me. So there was no one with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Then he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard about it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were terrified in his presence. There are people who say they've seen ghosts. I don't necessarily believe that. But it's as if they saw a ghost. They thought he's long gone. They haven't thought about Joseph. And when they did, they tried to put it out of their minds for their guilt over what they had done to him. And now he's standing in front of them, and he has the authority, the power of life and death over them. And Joseph takes 5 steps in this passage that I want you to see that are steps to reconcile a broken relationship. Here's step number 1. Don't publicly air your dirty laundry. Don't publicly air your dirty laundry. Joseph clears the room. That means all of the Egyptian officials who were there to attend to him, who were record keepers or who took the money for the grain that people were buying, all of those people are sent out. If there were other people along with the brothers who were there to buy grain, because the whole world's starving to death because of this famine, if there were others, they were sent out. It is Joseph and his brothers. He is there alone with them. Why is that important? Because this deliberate act of privacy is also an act of mercy. Joseph had the right to shame them, to expose them. Joseph had the right to get revenge on them and say, no, I won't sell you any grain after what you did to me. I won't sell you any food. But Joseph chooses in this moment to make this moment of reconciliation private. You see, reconciliation thrives in an environment where the other person's dignity is protected. Dignity protected opens the door for forgiveness and for a relationship to begin to flourish again, to have that moment when the seeds of a relationship can begin to grow again. Michael Reagan was the adopted son of President Reagan and his first wife. Before he became a Christian and when President Reagan was elected, Michael Reagan wrote a book. And it was one of those tell-all books where they tell the dirty laundry and the family secrets and all those things that happened behind closed doors. About 3 years later, he got saved, became a Christian. And when he became a Christian, he suddenly realized that that book that he had written was so offensive that he went back to the publisher and he asked them to never print a second printing of that first book. He wrote a second book called Twice Adopted that was printed, but he left out all of those other salacious stories that he had told in the first book. Michael Reagan said, writing that first book was the biggest mistake of my life. I wounded the very people I love because I made private pain public. So if you want to reconcile a relationship, the first step is don't air your dirty laundry. Avoid confronting people in front of others. Don't drag the rest of the family into your drama. Don't post on Wednesday before the gathering at Grandma's on Thursday for Thanksgiving how much you dread going in there with your cousins because they're such terrible people. That is not the way to reconcile a relationship. Often we feel like, you know what, I need to state my case. I need to make sure everybody knows that I was the one who was wronged. That's never going to be the winning recipe for reconciling a relationship. Jesus said in Matthew 18:15, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault, look at this, in private. If he listens to you, you've won your brother. So the first step is don't publicly air your dirty laundry. Deal with whatever matter you have to deal with in private. Second, don't play the blame game. Don't play the blame game. Look at verse 4. Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I am your brother Joseph. And now I'm going to prove it. Whom you sold to Egypt. It's not somebody pretending to be Joseph. That was a detail that only he would know. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me ahead of you to save lives. Now I want you to notice something. This is important. Joseph did not sweep their behavior under the rug. He didn't pretend it didn't happen. He even doesn't pretend that it didn't hurt. He acknowledges his own hurt. You are the ones who sold me as a slave into Egypt. But notice this. He reframes everything under the providence of God. You sold me, but God sent me. In verse 7, so God sent me ahead of you to ensure for you a remnant on the earth to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. You see, Joseph has reached a place of looking back on his hurt when he can say, good came out of the pain I endured. Forgiveness becomes possible when I look for and see the hand of God in my hurt. It's not saying the hurt's not real. It's not like we're acting like something didn't happen. But what we're saying is that we choose providence over bitterness. We choose purpose over punishment. And we choose redemption over resentment. You know, it's an amazing thing. But when there's some memory of a past hurt, it's amazing how often those things pop up. You know, I don't even think about a person sometimes, and then all of a sudden, that old hurt, that old offense, that old moment when they said something or they did something or they hurt someone very close to me whom I love, whom I thought that they should have never said that about or done that to. Those old memories begin to reflood back into my life. I need to refuse to rehearse that over and over in my mind. And I need to refuse to assume the worst motives about those that I'm trying to be reconciled with. Most of the time, we see others in the worst light possible. We see ourselves in the best light possible. We think our motives were pretty pure, but our cousin that did that to us, or that family member that offended and hurt us, we see them in the worst possible light. Joseph chooses to refuse to play the blame game. 2015, Dylan Ruth walked into the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. A Bible study was going on. There were 13 people there. He walked in, they welcomed him in. Now, the Emmanuel AME Church is a majority black church, and Dylan Ruth was a white guy. But they welcomed him in, started talking to him. But after a few minutes, Dylan Ruth pulled out a firearm and opened fire, and he killed 9 people in that church, in that Bible study. And the amazing thing is that when the time came for him to be sentence or to be arraigned. There were people there who spoke. One gentleman stood up and he said, I refuse to let hate write the final chapter. I forgive you. Nadine Collier, who was wounded, said, you took something very precious from me, but I forgive you. One of the things that we have to do as followers of Jesus is to refuse to allow hate and bitterness and resentment to color the way that we see other people around us. We are to be the people who are the forgivers. We're to be the people who forgive first. That's who we're called to be. To model for people what our Savior has done for us. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I wrestled with this part of this passage this week because I'm like you. I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but out of the blue, one of those old memories will come back of someone who did something very hurtful in my life, people who've questioned my motives, people who've said sometimes horrible things, who don't even know me. And sometimes, this old desire for revenge begins to boil in you. And it's hard not to act on that. It's hard not to dwell on that. But I'm going to tell you there's no peace in that. It will steal your joy. It will suck the life out of you if you allow it to dominate you. Don't play the blame game. Number 3, do welcome them back into your life. Look at verse 9. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay, for you shall live in the land of Goshen. That's the best land in Egypt. He says, you shall be near me, you and your children and grandchildren and your flocks and your herds and all you have. Come down to me. You shall be near me. This is an act of brotherly love. Joseph acts out of the knowledge that he has. One of the things he tells them is, look, you think this famine's bad now? We're only 2 years in and there's 5 more years to go. You got to come down here so I can take care of you. Joseph makes the move to welcome them back into his life. Now look, the restoration of a relationship is complicated. I want to acknowledge that. I'm not telling you that these 5 steps will be immediate or easy. And I also want to address this. While we are called as Christians, we are commanded as Christians to extend forgiveness. Forgiveness is not optional obedience for a follower of Jesus. Reconciling a relationship is another step. And I want to acknowledge this. Sometimes it is neither possible nor wise. If there was abuse involved, it may well not be wise to reconcile the relationship. Forgiveness is not an option. But reconciliation requires all parties to come to the table. And when someone denies their culpability, when they are unrepentant, it is going to be very difficult to reconcile a relationship. So while reconciliation is not always wise or possible, what we need to do in most situations, because there are relationships that should be restored, is to reopen that door gently. Here's what most of us do. We don't really reconcile relationships. We just settle for a ceasefire at grandma's at Thanksgiving. We just settle for keeping our mouths closed and enduring the 3 hours or 4 hours that we're there. And then we are set free until at least Christmas, and then we're set free until the 4th of July. That's the way a lot of our families function, or may I say dysfunction. But there's something better, and that is rebuilding a relationship. In 2019, there was a social media post that kind of went viral about a dad in Oklahoma. The names were withheld because the dad didn't want the story told with his son's name in it. But his son got involved in substance abuse, started stealing to fund his habit, and eventually he stole his dad's pickup truck. Well, the dad didn't want to report it stolen. He was trying to reach out to his son, but the son never came back. And finally, his insurance agent told him, look, you need to report this truck stolen or you'll be liable for whatever happens in it. And so the dad reluctantly reported the truck stolen. Well, about 6 months later, the son was arrested, and he had several warrants out on him for things, drug possession and things like that. But the police officer who makes the arrest runs the warrant. He's driving a stolen truck, so he's arrested for driving a stolen truck too. So they put him in the orange jumpsuit and handcuffs and send him back to his hometown, to the county seat where he lived, about 2 hours away from where he was arrested. And the judge knew the dad. So the dad's sitting in the courtroom. And so the judge says on the day he's going to be arraigned, does the dad have anything to say? And the dad stood up. There was a good bit of tension in the courtroom in that moment. They're like, is he going to blast his son, tell him how disappointed he is in him? The father stands up and he says, I want all the charges dropped. I want you to drop all the charges. Now, they could drop the charge on the stolen truck because that was the dad's doing. But the drug charges had to stand. But he told the judge, Judge, I don't want to punish him. I want to rebuild him. Now, that might be naive for a father of a young man who's addicted to substances, right? But it is the proof of a father's love. And it's the way you reconcile a relationship. Not by dishing out punishment for the hurt that someone put you through, but by rebuilding the relationship from the ground up. Number 4, give people unexpected blessings. The fourth step, if you want to reconcile a relationship, after you've gone through those first 3 steps, do give people unexpected blessings. Look at verse 16. Now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, now they're there, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this. Load your livestock, go to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your household and come to me. I'll give you the best land of Egypt, and you will eat of the fat of the land. Now you are ordered, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones, for your wives, and bring your father and come. And do not concern yourselves with your property, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. They're about to receive an incredible blessing. Joseph's family is given the very best land possible to graze their flocks. They will be provided with abundant food in a time of tremendous famine all over the known world at that time. Joseph's family is going to be taken care of. You see, grace doesn't offer the minimum just to get by. Grace always offers extravagance. It goes above and beyond. And that's what we see a picture of in this moment. Maybe there's a peace offering that you could extend to that person in your family to reconcile this relationship. Maybe you could go above and beyond. Douglas County, Colorado Deputy Sheriff Cody Hubbard was out on patrol about a year ago when he was following a car that had expired plates. Deputy Hubbard pulls the car over. He talks to the lady who's in it. She's unemployed. She's a single mom. She can't pay to have the license renewed on the car. And he says to her, I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to get back in the car and I want you to follow me. Reluctantly, she didn't know what was going to happen. She followed him. And he drove straight to the DMV, where he walked in with her, and out of his own wallet, he pulled out the money to pay to have her car renewed. Grace goes above and beyond what is required. Grace offers an extravagant offering to say, let's make this right together. Do give people unexpected blessings. And finally, do take the initiative. Joseph didn't wait for an apology. This is our biggest problem in reconciling relationships. We always think that other person's going to come around to my way of thinking. They're going to see it my way. They're going to come to me and ask me for forgiveness. Read the text. Joseph's brothers never asked him for forgiveness for what they did to him. They didn't. Joseph takes the initiative anyway. He refuses to let pride or fear or that old hurt keep him from making the relationship right. So here's my challenge to you. Send that text. Make that phone call. Make it private. Make it pointed. Get to the point. But tell them the relationship matters than the past hurt. Take the initiative. Why should you do that? Because that's the gospel. You see, in the story of the gospel, we're not Joseph. We're the brothers. We're the offending party. But God, being rich in mercy, extends grace toward us because of his love for us. Here's the way Paul put it in the book of Romans. But while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ made the choice to go to a cross, to pay our price, to die a death we deserved, and to extend to us the offer of reconciling a relationship between sinful people like us and a holy God. He became the mediator between a holy God and sinful people. He took the initiative to take your sins and mine on that cross so that we could be forgiven. If there is anything that should prompt us toward gratitude, it is that singular thought. As we move toward Thanksgiving, if there is anything that should move us toward being so grateful to God, it is that he chose not to overlook the offense, but to pay the price for the offense so that we could be reconciled to God. Let's pray together. Father, I pray for everyone under the sound of my voice who's going to go into an awkward situation this Thanksgiving. And Lord, grant us that we would be ministers of reconciliation, that we would actively depict the way that you want our relationships to work. Give us the strength and the humility to be forgiving and reconciling people. And Lord, by doing that, help us to shine the light of the gospel and to communicate what you have done to reconcile lost people like us to a holy God. In Jesus' name, amen.